You don't notice the moment things begin to slip. You only notice the silence that comes after. I think it started with the pillows. Or maybe the quiet click of the door one night when I'd already turned the lights off. I remember waking up and reaching for him, touching only cool sheets. At the time, I told myself he'd had a headache. Or maybe I'd been snoring again. It didn't occur to me to ask. Not yet. The next night, I was half awake when I heard him leave. And by the third, I didn't even bother pretending to sleep. We'd been married 8 years. Together for 11. Not quite newlyweds, not quite old married. Somewhere in that middle space where comfort can start to curdle. We still laugh, still share meals, still say I love you, but lately, those words feel like something we say so we won't have to say other things. I confronted him on a Sunday morning, over coffee. My hands were wrapped around the mug. I needed it to stay grounded. You didn't come to bed again last night. He didn't look up. Didn't want to wake you. You didn't. I was awake. A beat. Then, I've been having trouble sleeping. That was it. Not we, not together. Just him, alone. Is it something I did? I asked, before I could stop myself. He blinked, finally meeting my eyes. No. God, no. It's just. I think I sleep better on the couch right now. That's all. I nodded, sipped my coffee, said nothing. But inside, something small and heavy lodged in my chest. It's been 3 weeks. He still doesn't sleep in our bed. He's not cold about it. That's the worst part. He still texts me when he's on the way home, still makes pasta the way I like it, still kisses me goodbye in the mornings. It's just the nights that are different. As if the intimacy we used to share belongs to a previous version of us, one that he's quietly decided to retire. I told my sister. Sort of. I framed it like a joke. What's the etiquette when your husband moves to the couch without notice? She laughed, then frowned. Wait, seriously? Yeah. I mean, he says it's stress. Work stuff. Her response was quick. Is he cheating? That word felt like a slap. I hadn't even let it form in my own mind yet. No, I said. I don't think so. Then what is it? I didn't have an answer. Still don't. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed and watched the door. I listened as he shuffled down the hallway, the floorboards creaking beneath him. I waited for the couch springs to groan under his weight. I imagined him lying there in the dark, scrolling on his phone, maybe reading the news, maybe watching something on YouTube to help him fall asleep. Or maybe just lying still. Avoiding me. I got up. Walked to the living room. He wasn't watching anything, just lying there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. You okay? I whispered. He turned his head, startled. Then smiled, that same soft smile he's always used to diffuse tension. Just tired. Come back to bed. He didn't answer. After a long pause, he said, It's nothing personal. I just need some space at night. I think better alone. I stood there for a second too long, unsure what to do with my hands. With my heart. And then I nodded, backed away, and returned to our bedroom alone. I haven't told anyone else. Not yet. It feels too raw. Too strange. I keep hoping it'll resolve itself. That one night he'll slide in beside me again, and it'll feel like before. That I'll wake up to his breath warm against my neck and realize I was being dramatic. But every morning, I wake up alone. And every night, I fall asleep wondering what it means. Here's the part I'm not proud of. I started checking his phone. I didn't want to. I told myself I wouldn't. But after a week of silence and vague reassurances, I found myself sitting at the kitchen counter while he showered, staring at his screen like it might hold the answers he couldn't say out loud. There was nothing. No strange names. No flirty messages. No secret apps. Just the usual emails, soccer highlights, a Reddit thread about building garden boxes. It didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made me feel worse. Because if he's not cheating, if there's no one else, then why does it still feel like abandonment? I don't know how long I'm supposed to wait for someone to come back to me. I don't know if I'm being patient, or just letting myself be slowly erased. And the hardest question, the one I keep circling, am I the one making this a problem? Maybe he really does just need space. But isn't marriage the opposite of that? There are words that sound harmless until you live inside them. Nothing's wrong. He says it like a kindness. A balm. A way to assure me that this space between us isn't dangerous, just temporary. Necessary. He says it like he believes it. But I've started to realize that nothing isn't neutral. It's a wall. It's a no-entry sign that looks like politeness. And space? Space is only peaceful if you both agree to open the distance. I didn't. We met in line at a coffee shop. I know that sounds cliché, but it wasn't. It was one of those gray mornings when everything feels like it's moving through syrup. I'd spilled coffee on my shirt that morning. He was behind me, made a joke about needing a punch card for life's minor humiliations. I laughed. He bought me a second coffee. His name is Mark. He was warm in that quiet way that makes people listen more carefully. He didn't talk over anyone, didn't force his opinions into conversations, but when he spoke, you listened. You wanted to. There was something grounding about him. Like standing in a room with a fireplace even if it wasn't lit yet. Our early relationship was easy. Natural. We moved in together after a year and a half. Married 2 years after that. There were rough patches, like any couple, but nothing ever felt permanent. Until now. This doesn't feel like a rough patch. This feels like a rerouting. And I have no idea where it leads. I've started rehearsing conversations with him in my head. Not the fights. Not the accusations. Just the gentle questions. The vulnerable ones. Do you still want to be close to me? Is this just sleep, or something else? Am I the only one who feels like we're becoming strangers? But I never say them out loud. Because the truth is, I'm afraid of his answer. Or worse, of his non-answer. He's always been good at the soft dodge. At saying I'm fine in a tone that makes you feel rude for asking twice. At changing the subject just enough to shift your focus. It never felt manipulative, just practiced. Like someone who grew up in a home where silence was safer than truth. I told Jenna, my coworker and friend, over lunch. I floated it, like bait in the water. I think my husband's dealing with something, but he won't really talk about it, I said, poking at my salad. She didn't miss a beat. Men. I rolled my eyes. That's not helpful. Sorry, she said, softer. Is he shutting down or pulling away? Both. And I don't know what to do without sounding like I'm nagging. She gave me a long look. Do you think he's depressed? The words sat heavy between us. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe. He hasn't said that. But he's not himself lately. She nodded. Could be work. Could be something he's not ready to say out loud. Could be a million things. But you don't deserve to live in limbo just because he's not ready. Limbo. That's exactly what it feels like. Waiting for a phone to ring that you're not sure you even dialed right. That night, I decided to try again. He was in the kitchen, rinsing dishes. I leaned against the counter, trying to find an angle that didn't feel confrontational. Can I ask you something? He glanced over. Sure. Do you miss sleeping in the same bed? He hesitated. That pause, not long, but just long enough, made my heart flinch. He said. I don't sleep well lately. And I don't want to wake you up. But you didn't ask, I said. You just left. I didn't think it needed to be a big deal. It's not a big deal, I said quickly. Too quickly. It doesn't feel like nothing. That's all. He dried his hands slowly. It's really just about sleep. But it doesn't feel like just sleep to me. He didn't answer. And I didn't push. Because somewhere deep in my chest, something whispered, he's not ready. And maybe he never will be. I started keeping a journal. It's not something I've done since high school, but it helps. There's something grounding about writing things down, even when they don't make sense. April 12th. He made me coffee this morning. Said I looked tired. I wanted to say, yeah, probably because I cry quietly in bed every other night, but instead I just smiled and said, thanks. I hate how normal everything looks on the surface. April 14th. We watched a movie together tonight. He laughed at the funny parts. So did I. It felt good. Then we turned off the TV and went in separate directions. It hit me then how strange it is to share a life but not a pillow. April 17th. I miss him. And not just in a physical way. I miss the little nudges under the covers, the late-night conversations, the warmth of him turning toward me in his sleep. I feel like I've been put on mute. The weirdest part? He still touches me during the day, still kisses my forehead, still rubs my back absent-mindedly while I'm on the couch. It's not that he's gone. It's that he's absent in the places that used to matter most. I saw my mom last weekend. She asked how we were doing, that polite how's married life kind of way that parents do. I hesitated, said, we're fine. She nodded, then added, your father used to sleep on the couch when things got rough. I blinked. I didn't know that. She shrugged. We never told you. Figured kids didn't need to see everything. I wanted to ask what rough meant. I wanted to ask how long it lasted. I wanted to ask if they ever really fixed it. But I didn't. Because the look on her face told me she was already somewhere else. Maybe this runs deeper than I thought. Maybe I learned silence before I even had language for it. Last night, I tried something small. I laid a pillow on his side of the bed. Left the covers turned down. Left the lamp on. He came in. Saw it. Looked at me. I'm still sleeping out there tonight, he said, gently. I nodded. Okay. But when he walked away, it felt like a door closing. And this time, I didn't cry. This time, I just stared at the ceiling and wondered if this is how people slowly become roommates. I'm not ready to give up. But I also don't know how long you're supposed to wait for someone to turn toward you again before you start turning away yourself. Is it cruel to ask for more when someone says they're trying? Or is it self-preservation? I wish I had an answer. I wish he'd give me one. But right now, all I have is the empty space where his body used to be. And the ache of everything unsaid. It's strange what starts to feel normal when you stop resisting it. The way he closes the bedroom door gently so it won't wake me. The early clatter of mugs in the kitchen when I know he didn't sleep. The imprint on the couch cushion where his body has learned to belong. It's been almost 2 months. 2 months he left our bed with a quiet excuse and never really came back. At first, I thought it was temporary. Then I started calling it a phase. Now I don't know what it is. I just know it's not changing. And the worst part is how good we are at pretending nothing is wrong. The weekend felt unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that clings to the corners of the house and hums in your ears when no one's speaking. Mark worked in the garage most of Saturday. I cleaned the bathroom, folded laundry, rearranged the bookshelf in a way I hoped he'd notice. He didn't. That night, I made dinner, real dinner, not just pasta and frozen bread. Roasted chicken, lemon, thyme, the works. He thanked me, smiled, even kissed my forehead. But still, when the clock crept past 10, he made his way down the hall, not to our bedroom, but to the living room. I followed him. Mark? He looked up from his phone. Yeah? I stood there, wrapped in a cardigan, arms folded so tightly I could feel my own nails digging into my skin. You still love me, right? He didn't say anything right away. Just blinked, like I'd asked if he remembered to take out the trash. Of course I do, he said eventually. But the pause sat louder than the words. It's amazing how much of love is made up of things we don't say. I've been replaying everything, trying to figure out the moment the shift happened. Was it something I missed? Something I did? A sentence I didn't hear properly, or one I shouldn't have said? I keep going back to early February. We were at dinner with friends. I laughed too loudly at something Nate said. When I glanced at Mark, he looked tight, quiet, not angry, exactly, just closed off. Later that night, in bed, I touched his arm. He didn't pull away, but he didn't lean in either. He just said, I'm tired. Maybe it started before that. Maybe it started with the stress at work, when he stopped bringing stories home. Or maybe it started with me getting too comfortable, too distracted, too focused on functioning instead of connecting. We stopped having sex weeks before he stopped sleeping beside me. I didn't even notice how long it had been until I felt the ache of it. Not just physically, but emotionally. The loss of touch feels sharper than absence. Like being in a museum, staring at something beautiful you're not allowed to hold. I called my mom again. I don't know why I keep doing that. She doesn't have the answers. She grew up in the generation where silence was noble and stoicism meant survival. Give him time, she said. Sometimes men need space to figure things out. I wanted to ask, and what am I supposed to do in the meantime? But instead I said, yeah. Maybe. She told me about the garden. About the neighbors. About some show she and my dad are watching, like the world isn't quietly falling apart in my living room. Jenna offered wine and sympathy on her back porch Sunday night. I know it sounds harsh, she said, but people don't just leave the bed without leaving something else, too. I shook my head. He's not cheating. Okay, she said, raising her hands. But even if it's not physical, you don't have to be sleeping with someone else to be gone. I hated how much sense that made. He's still here, I said. He's not distant all the time. He still makes coffee. He still asks how my day was. Jenna took a sip of her wine. Yeah, but does he listen when you answer? I didn't reply. There's this moment I keep coming back to. From early in our relationship. We were on a trip to Chicago, one of those spontaneous, post-honeymoon phase weekends. I'd packed too little. It rained the whole time. My shoes were soaked. I got cranky, hungry, damp. And Mark, without saying anything, ducked into a bookstore and came out with dry socks and a cup of tea. He didn't try to fix me. Just softened the edges of my frustration. That's the man I married. And he's still here. Somewhere. But I don't know how to find him. Monday night, I stayed up past midnight. He came home late, said there was a deadline at work. His eyes were bloodshot. I asked if he was okay. He said, just tired. He always says that now. Just tired. Just sleep. Just space. It's never I'm sad. Never I'm lost. I don't know what's happening to me. I want him to say something messy. Something real. I want a crack in the calm. Sometimes, I imagine what would happen if I just stopped asking, stopped waiting. If I pulled the duvet across the whole bed. If I left the door locked. Would he knock? Or would he just stay on the couch forever? That's the question that haunts me more than anything, because I don't know which answer would hurt more. This morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize my face. I look dimmed. Like a photo that's been left in the sun too long. Still familiar, but faded at the edges. I used to be confident. Curious. Funny, even. I used to dance while brushing my teeth. I used to leave notes in Mark's lunch, even when we were both too tired for actual romance. Now I feel like I'm auditioning for a role I used to have, hoping he'll cast me again. Tonight, I sat on the couch next to him. He was scrolling through his phone. I leaned in. Not dramatically, not seductively, just leaned. He didn't move away. But he didn't move closer either. So I whispered, "Do you miss me?" He looked at me for a long moment. Then said, "I don't know." And that was worse than no. Because it meant maybe he hadn't even noticed I was missing. I've started talking to myself out loud in the mornings. It's not some dramatic sign of unraveling. It's just quiet here, and sometimes I need to hear a voice, even if it's only my own. Sometimes I narrate mundane things, okay, coffee first, then emails, like I'm trying to prove I still exist outside his silence. This morning I said, "I miss us," just to see how it sounded in the air. Like saying it might bring it closer. It didn't. He was already gone when I woke up. A note on the counter, as usual. Early call. Back for dinner. M. No love you. No XO. Just the practical fact of his absence. I used to love his handwriting. Now I hate how familiar it is, how practiced, how easy. I tried something new this week. A therapist. I haven't told Mark. Not because I'm hiding it, exactly, but because I don't know what I'd say. "Hey, since you won't talk to me, I'm paying someone else to listen." She's kind, neutral in a way that feels safe, not cold. Her name is Laura, and she sits with her hands folded like she's holding something invisible but heavy. In our first session, she asked, "What do you want from this?" I thought about lying. About saying something vague and self-protective. Instead, I said, "I want to feel like I'm not crazy for missing someone who's still right in front of me." She nodded. Didn't write that part down. We had dinner together Thursday night. Real dinner. At the table. No TV. No phones. I cooked. He opened wine. We talked about the pasta. The neighbors. The weather. We danced politely around anything that mattered. At one point, he reached for the Parmesan and our hands touched, just briefly, and it felt like being startled by a memory. The old version of us would have joked about it. Would have leaned into it. Maybe kissed over the table. This version just moved on. Afterward, we did dishes side by side. It felt almost normal. Until he dried his hands and said, "I think I'm going to sleep early." And by early, I knew he meant elsewhere. I stood there holding a wet bowl, watching his back disappear down the hall, and thought, this is what grief looks like when it doesn't have a death to anchor it. I keep thinking about the first apartment we lived in. The one with the weirdly low showerhead and the landlord who always forgot our names. It was tiny. Half our furniture didn't fit. We used a box for a coffee table for months. But we were so close then. Physically, emotionally. Everything was shared, the toothpaste, the rent, the exhaustion. We took turns picking up takeout. We stayed up late watching dumb movies. I'd crawl into bed first and he'd come in behind me, always pulling me toward him in his sleep like a reflex. Now he sleeps on a separate piece of furniture like it's always been that way. It hasn't, and I know that. But my body's starting to forget. Jenna texted me a screenshot from Reddit. AITA for wanting my husband to sleep in our bed again after weeks on the couch? It wasn't mine. But it might as well have been. Underneath were hundreds of comments. You're not wrong for wanting closeness. If he won't talk about it, that's a problem. Is he cheating? Or just emotionally unavailable? You deserve answers. I didn't reply to her. But I kept rereading the thread all night. There's something horrifying and comforting about seeing your life reflected in strangers' arguments. Friday night, I stayed up late reading. Mark came in around midnight. He looked surprised to see me awake, like I wasn't supposed to still be there. Like I was a variable he hadn't accounted for. "Hey," I said, closing my book. "Hey," he echoed. "Long day?" "Not really." He stood there for a second, then added, "You should get some rest." I nodded. "You too." And then, almost without thinking, I asked, "Are we okay?" His expression didn't change. He didn't flinch. He didn't frown. He just paused. "I don't know," he said. And that was somehow worse than a no. At therapy, Laura asked me if I thought he was depressed. Maybe, I said. He's always been private about hard things. Has he ever avoided you like this before? No, I said. That's what makes it scary. It feels like a slow goodbye. She looked at me for a long time. What would you need to feel close again? She asked. I opened my mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. And then said, I want him to tell me what's going on. Even if it hurts. Last night, I brought it up. Really brought it up. He was reading on the couch, the soft glow of the lamp casting shadows under his eyes. I sat down across from him. Not beside him. Not behind him. Across, where I could see everything he did or didn't say. Can we talk? He set the book down. I don't know what's happening with us, I said. And I'm trying so hard to be patient, to not pressure you. But I can't keep guessing if we're okay. I need to know what you're feeling. He rubbed his face. It's not about you. I know that's supposed to help, I said. But it doesn't. Silence. I waited. Let it stretch. I feel off, he said finally. Disconnected. From everything, not just you. I nodded slowly. But you're not trying to reconnect. You're just retreating. He didn't deny it. I'm tired all the time, he added. Not just physically. Like, being in the world is exhausting. Are you unhappy? I asked. Another pause. I don't know, he said. Maybe I'm just not the same person you married. I swallowed. Maybe I'm not either. We sat in that for a while. Then I said it. Soft, but clear. Do you still want this? He looked at me. And said, I want it. I slept alone again. But this time, I didn't cry. This time, I stared at the ceiling and thought about how love changes. How it bruises, folds, recedes. How sometimes the absence hurts more than the break. And how sometimes the cruelest answer is the almost. I didn't sleep that night. Not just because of what he said, I want it, but because of what he didn't say after. No follow-up. No reach for my hand. No apology for the distance. Just stillness. Like the weight of what he'd admitted was enough, and now the conversation was over. And maybe it was. For him. For me, it's never over. It hums under everything. The next morning, I made us pancakes. It was a reflex, comfort food, like we used to have on lazy Sundays. He came into the kitchen, hair still mussed, and looked surprised. "You made breakfast?" I smiled, tried to keep it light. "I figured we could start the day together." He nodded, sat down, ate. We talked about the news, about the neighbor's dog, about a podcast he'd listened to. It was almost normal. Almost. But the whole time, I kept hearing the sentence again, "I want it." That sentence has an echo. Not just in the room, but in my body. It rings in the places where closeness used to live. I saw him laugh later that day. A real laugh. Not with me, with someone on the phone. Work, probably. He was sitting outside, leaning back in the patio chair, sunlight on his face. For a moment, I watched him through the window and felt like I was seeing a stranger. Not because he looked different, but because the warmth I saw in him wasn't mine anymore. That used to be my version of him. My safe place. My person. Now it feels borrowed. Or worse, returned. I tried touching him that night. Not sexually. Just a hand on his back as he reached for something in the fridge. A palm on his shoulder while he read. He didn't flinch. But he didn't lean in either. It's like touching a statue that used to be alive. Therapy helped, in the way that warm baths help sore muscles. Temporary, gentle, a reminder that your body still belongs to you. Laura asked me what I wanted to do next. "I don't want to leave," I said. "I just don't want to be invisible anymore." She said, "Do you think he sees you?" I didn't answer. That weekend, we were invited to a dinner party. Some friends from his job. I wasn't in the mood, but he asked if I wanted to go and I said yes, mostly because I wanted to see what he looked like out in the world. Wanted to see if I could still find my place beside him. We dressed up. He complimented my dress. That used to mean something. At the party, he was himself again. Engaged. Warm. Present. To them. He told a story I hadn't heard before. About something at work, something personal. I laughed along with everyone else, but my stomach twisted. Not because he was funny, he's always been funny, but because that version of him hasn't visited our home in months. When we got back in the car, I said, "You seemed like you were in a good mood tonight." He nodded. It was nice. I needed that. I waited. For a with you or even a hand on my leg. But nothing came. We drove home in silence. I asked Jenna if I was being dramatic. She didn't answer right away. Just sipped her wine, then said, "You're being lonely." And that's not the same thing. I stared at her for a long time. "I feel like I'm asking for too much." "You're asking your husband to sleep in the same bed," she said. "That's not too much. That's the bare minimum." "But if he's struggling, really struggling, am I supposed to put my pain on top of his?" "You're not stacking pain," she said. "You're asking for partnership." The worst moment came on a Wednesday. I was working from home. He was supposed to be out, but I heard the door open early. I went to greet him, expecting a smile, a casual hey. Instead, I found him in the kitchen, startled like I wasn't supposed to see him. He had his phone in his hand, angled away. I don't think it was anything. Not like that. But it was the look on his face. The quick flicker of guilt, like being caught in a thought he wasn't ready to explain. He said, "I forgot my charger," and left again. I stood in the hallway long after the door closed. It wasn't betrayal. It was something smaller. But it still hurt. Because lately, he looks more surprised to see me than he used to look happy. That night, I said, "I miss us." He looked at me across the dinner table. Blinked slowly. Didn't frown, didn't nod. Just sat there. Said nothing. And that nothing was louder than any rejection could have been. There's this specific humiliation that comes with begging for intimacy from someone who used to give it freely. You start second-guessing everything: your tone, your timing, your body. You start wondering if you've become unlovable, or if they've just stopped trying to see the parts of you that are still reaching. I've never been needy. I've never wanted to be the one who asks, "Do you still want me?" on a loop. But here I am, practicing vulnerability like it's a language I only half remember. And he just lives with the volume turned down. I thought about sleeping on the couch one night, just to see what it felt like on his side of the world. I didn't do it. But I stood there for a long time, staring at the blanket he keeps folded on the armrest. There was something so lonely about it. So deliberate. As if he's made a home in this halfway space, and I'm not invited. Laura asked me if I'd ever been afraid to ask for love. I said, only when I thought the answer might be no. She said, what if it's not no, but it's not yes either? What if it's just silence? I said, that's worse. And I meant it. Here's something I've realized: you can't force someone to show up. You can lay the table. You can pour the wine. You can dress up and soften your voice and ask all the right questions. But you can't make someone reach back. You can't make them want to touch you just because you're standing close. You can only stand there, hand extended, until you start to feel foolish. And I'm beginning to feel foolish. He touched my back tonight, just lightly, as he passed me on the way to the hallway. I froze. It was such a small thing. But it lit something in me like a flare. Like maybe the door isn't all the way closed. Maybe. But the flare dimmed quickly. Because that's all there was. No pause, no word. Just a hand in a hallway and a reminder that sometimes love returns in fragments. And sometimes it doesn't return at all. There are certain things you don't realize you've stopped doing until you try to do them again. Like shaving both legs before bed. Or setting out 2 glasses of wine instead of 1. Or folding laundry with the TV on low because someone else might be falling asleep down the hall. Lately, I've started noticing all the ways I've adjusted to solitude without meaning to. The second pillow on our bed still sits there, but untouched. A decoy. His slippers are still near the closet, but he doesn't wear them anymore. He pads barefoot into the living room every night, careful, like a thief trying not to be caught in the act of absence. My brother, Will, came to visit this weekend. He brought his daughter, my niece, Emma, who's 6 and obsessed with sea turtles. They stayed over Saturday night, which meant air mattresses, cartoons, cereal, and a house full of voices that didn't know how quiet it's been. Will and I have always been close, in the way siblings who survived the same emotional weather tend to be. Our dad wasn't cruel, just unreachable. A man who thought affection was best left implied. Our mom filled the gaps, but I think even she got tired of asking for what she needed. So we learned not to ask. Not to need. Not out loud. Saturday night, after Emma fell asleep and Mark went off to Red for a bit, Will and I opened a bottle of wine on the porch. Everything okay? He asked. No lead in. Just direct, like he could see the quiet all over my body. I shrugged. Fine, okay. Will gave me that look, the one siblings reserve for when they already know the answer but want you to say it anyway. He's been sleeping on the couch, I said, staring at the dark yard. Since when? 2 months. More? He whistled low. Is that, like, a marriage thing? Or a sleep issue? He says it's about sleep. But it doesn't feel like just sleep. Will sipped his wine. Do you think he's? I don't know. Hiding something? I shook my head. No. I don't think it's someone else. I think it's something he can't or won't about. He was quiet for a moment. Then, that almost feels worse. I nodded. It does. Will just sat with me. Which is probably the most anyone can do when your heartbreak doesn't come from a breaking, just from slow, quiet erosion. That night, I dreamed of the first time Mark said I love you. It was snowing. I remember that clearly. We were standing under the sad little awning outside a coffee shop, hands red from the cold, sharing a stale croissant like it was gold. He said it too fast. Like it surprised even him. I love you, he blurted, then immediately looked away, like he wanted to shove the words back into his mouth. I remember laughing, saying it back, and thinking, this is it. This is the person who's going to know all of me. I woke up with tears in my eyes and no one beside me to see them. The next morning, I made pancakes for everyone again. Emma spilled syrup on her shirt and Mark offered to help clean it. He was sweet with her. Patient. She called him Uncle M and told him she wished he liked cartoons more. Later, while Will was packing up the car, she pulled me aside and asked, "Why doesn't Uncle M sleep in your bed?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I saw him go to the couch last night," she said. "That's not where grown-ups sleep together." I tried to smile. "He's just been having trouble sleeping lately." She nodded solemnly, like she understood. But then she added, "When my mommy was mad at my daddy, she made him sleep on the couch too." Then they had a talk and he came back. Out of the mouths of babes. That night, I brought it up again. Not the couch. Not directly. But the distance. "I feel like we're drifting," I said, standing at the kitchen sink. Mark was rinsing a mug. He didn't look up. "I know. I'm trying," I said. "But it's like I'm doing all the rowing." He set the mug down gently. "You act like I'm the only one who's drifting." "Then talk to me," I said, louder than I meant. "Tell me what's going on. If you're unhappy. If you want out. If I've done something. Just don't keep doing this thing where you disappear but still say everything's fine." "I don't know what to say," he said. "Try," I whispered. He leaned against the counter, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because I don't know what I'm feeling half the time. And I'm scared that if I say the wrong thing, I'll break what's left." "You think it's not already breaking?" His silence answered for him. Later, I crawled into bed, left the lamp on longer than usual. Part of me hoped he'd follow. He didn't. At 1:17 a.m., I got up and walked down the hall. He was asleep. On the couch. Curled up, one arm under his head, blanket askew. I stood there for a long time. Not angry. Not sad. Just tired. I asked Laura if it was possible to lose someone who hadn't left. She said yes. That some people never actually walk away, they just stop arriving. We had sex a few nights ago. I don't even know how it started. We were watching something dumb. He laughed. I laughed. Our knees touched. He didn't pull away. One thing led to another, and suddenly we were kissing like we hadn't in months. It was good. Familiar. But not effortless. Like trying to remember a dance with steps we hadn't practiced in a long time. Afterward, I laid there waiting for something. A hand to reach for mine. A breath against my shoulder. A word. Instead, he rolled away, murmured, "I'm going to sleep out there." And just like that, the ache returned. Because it felt like closure, not reconnection. Like I'd been given just enough to hope, and then reminded of the truth: physical closeness doesn't fix emotional distance. Sometimes it just magnifies it. The next morning, he made me coffee. Said, "Thanks for last night." I smiled. But inside, I wanted to scream, because gratitude isn't love. And I'm not an act of kindness. I'm a person. A partner. And I am so tired of being polite about my own disappearance. There's a specific kind of heartbreak that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with a slammed door or a shouting match. It doesn't come with infidelity or a sudden disappearance. Sometimes, it's just a quiet Tuesday morning and you realize your husband hasn't said good morning to you in 3 days. And you hadn't noticed. Or maybe you had, but you were too tired to let yourself feel it. That's what grief does in long-term relationships. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it sits with you at breakfast and asks if you remembered to buy milk. I found an old photo in my email last week. One of those on this day, 5 years ago, memories. We were on vacation in Vancouver. I'd snapped a selfie of us under an awning in the rain, him holding a coffee, me soaked and laughing. He was kissing my temple. I remember how cold his lips had been from the drink. I stared at the photo for a long time, then closed my phone. I couldn't decide if it made me feel better or worse. Nostalgia's tricky that way. Sometimes it heals, sometimes it reminds you what you're not getting anymore. We had a conversation the other night, if you can call it that. It was after dinner. I was drying dishes, and I just started talking. "I don't know if this is what love looks like," I said, my voice too calm for what I felt. "I don't think this version of us is working." He didn't look up right away. Just kept wiping down the counter. Then he said, "I know." That was it. Just I know. No defense, no explanation, no reassurance. And somehow, That was more painful than any argument could have been. Because when someone stops defending a relationship, they've already started letting go of it. Jenna told me to leave. Not out of anger, just blunt, clear, matter of fact. You've been sleeping alone, carrying all the emotional labor, doing therapy, bending backwards to fix something he won't even name, she said. What are you still hoping for? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. We went to his friend's birthday dinner last weekend. I debated not going. I was tired. Of pretending, mostly. But I went. Wore something nice. Did my hair. Practice smiling in the mirror the way you practice a speech before you give it. At the restaurant, he was charming. Laughed at all the right moments. Remembered people's drink orders. Squeezed my hand once under the table, not in a loving way, just a brief, performative gesture. Like saying, we're fine, without having to say it. No one asked if we were okay. They never do. Not when you look like the kind of couple who pays the bill on time and hosts dinner parties twice a year. That's the thing about quiet unraveling, it doesn't leave bruises you can point to. I tried to initiate sex again. I don't know why. Maybe I needed proof we weren't completely gone. Maybe I wanted to feel something before deciding to feel nothing. We kissed. It felt mechanical. Like we were both checking a box we didn't believe in anymore. Halfway through, he stopped. Sorry, he said, breathless. I'm not there. I'm sorry. He rolled away. And I laid there, skin burning with shame I couldn't explain. I feel like a stranger to you, I said quietly. He didn't respond. Eventually, he left the room. Laura asked me why I hadn't made any decisions yet. I said, because I keep thinking next week will be better. Then she asked, and is it? I didn't respond. My mom called. She was checking in. Asked how we were. I lied. Again. Good, I said. Busy. She told me about a friend from church whose husband moved into the guest room. He had sleep apnea, she said. They've slept apart for years now. I almost asked, do they still touch each other, but I didn't. Because I knew the answer didn't matter. I wasn't looking for sleep logistics. I was looking for someone to tell me I wasn't crazy for craving warmth. And I knew she couldn't give me that. We fought. Finally, not big. Not loud, just real. It started because I asked him to come to one of my therapy sessions. He said, I don't think I'm ready for that. I said, when will you be ready? I don't know, he said. I'm trying. You keep saying that, I snapped. But nothing changes. I don't know what you want me to do. Show up, I said. Pick a side, stay or go. Just stop floating in between while I pretend not to drown. He ran a hand through his hair. You make it hard to stay. I froze. Then I whispered, you make it hard to leave. He looked at me like he didn't know which was worse. He slept on the couch again. Of course he did. I stared at the empty space beside me and thought about what a friend once told me. Sometimes, the loneliest part of marriage is how long you'll wait for someone who's already gone. This morning, I found a receipt in the laundry. Nothing suspicious. Just a bookstore. A sandwich shop. But the date was a Saturday he told me he'd stayed in. I don't think he's cheating. But I do think he's lying. And sometimes those two things feel closer than they should. We made coffee side by side in silence. When he passed me my mug, our fingers touched. I didn't flinch. I didn't lean in. I just said, I'm not sure I know how to do this anymore. He looked at me. Then said, I think about that too. It wasn't cruel. That's the hardest part. It's easier to walk away when someone's yelling or throwing things or slamming doors. It's harder when they're still making coffee and watering the plants and offering to pick up eggs on the way home. But love isn't in the groceries. It's in whether someone still chooses you at the end of the day. And lately, I'm not sure I'm being chosen. It started with the light bulb in the hallway. It had been out for weeks, flickering, then finally dying. I'd asked twice if he could replace it, gently, without edge. He always said, yeah, I'll get to it. Last Tuesday, I replaced it myself. It wasn't the bulb, really. It was the metaphor. Because when you've been waiting for someone to notice you're sitting in the dark, There's something quietly heartbreaking about realizing you'll have to fix the light yourself. The next morning, he noticed. You replaced it, he said, standing under the glow like it was a surprise. I nodded. Yeah. I got tired of waiting. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something, then closed it. The kind of non-response that's somehow worse than silence. We stood there, bathed in the soft yellow of a bulb I'd chosen alone, in a hallway that used to feel like the path between us. Now it's just where we pass each other without touching. I almost left that night. Not dramatically. No suitcase. No speech. Just keys in hand, coat on, purse over my shoulder. I stood by the front door for 10 minutes, trying to decide if leaving would be an act of strength or surrender. In the end, I just took a walk around the block. The air was cold. My hands were bare. I didn't bring my phone. Every window I passed lit something in me. Families eating dinner, a couple laughing, a woman alone with her dog and a glass of wine. I thought, every house has its silence. But not all of them carry it like shame. When I came back, he was still on the couch. The TV was on. The volume low. Some documentary about oceans or whales or something. He didn't look at me when I walked in. Just said, hey. I sat on the edge of the armrest. Do you ever think about how we got here? He didn't pause the TV. Just said, yeah. Do you want to talk about it? He finally looked at me. And then, very quietly, he said, I'm scared I'm broken. It took me a second to respond. What do you mean? He ran a hand through his hair, eyes red. Not from tears, just exhaustion. I don't feel connected to anything lately. Not just you. Work. Friends. Myself. It's like I'm underwater. And every time you reach for me, I want to come up for air, but I can't. My throat tightened. I thought it was about us, I whispered. It's not, he said. But I know it feels like it is. Because it is, I said, louder now. Because I'm living inside the space your absence creates. I'm the one lying awake wondering what I did wrong. I'm the one dragging our relationship forward while you ghost it from inside the house. He didn't flinch. He just nodded. I know, he said. And I hate that. Then why won't you come back? He looked down. I don't know if I know how to. We sat in that moment for what felt like hours. Eventually, he turned off the TV. I thought maybe it would pass, he said. If I just waited. If I didn't make it worse by talking. I laughed, bitter, tired. That's the thing. You didn't say anything, and that's what made it worse. He looked at me. Really looked at me. And then, the words I didn't expect. I haven't felt like myself since my dad died. That was a year and a half ago. He barely cried. Took a few days off work. Gave a nice speech at the service. Said he was fine. I didn't know how to grieve, he said now. I thought grief was loud. Messy. But this was slow. Numb. I kept going because I thought that was what I was supposed to do. I nodded, stunned. You didn't talk to me about any of this. I didn't know how, he said. And the longer I stayed quiet, the more I felt like I couldn't come back without explaining everything, so I just drifted. But you kept saying everything was fine. Because I didn't want to lose you. You're already losing me. His eyes filled, finally. Not overflowing. Just glassy. I know. We didn't touch that night. Not because we were angry. But because grief, once named, has to settle somewhere. And ours was suddenly real, sitting between us like a third person on the couch. He slept on the couch again. But this time, he said, I'm sorry. And that mattered more than I expected it would. The next day, he asked if we could go for a drive. We didn't talk much. Just let the road hum beneath us. I stared out the window at fields that used to mean nothing and now looked like escape. At one point, he reached for my hand. I let him. It wasn't forgiveness, just contact. Sometimes, you have to let the body remember before the heart does. That night, I asked, do you want to come to therapy with me? He hesitated, then nodded. I don't know what I'll say, he added. But I'll show up. That was the first real promise he's made in months. We started talking again carefully, like walking on glass. Sometimes, the conversations ended too soon. Sometimes, he got quiet halfway through. Sometimes, I cried in the bathroom because I wanted more than he could give. But he stayed in the house after dark now. Stayed close, sat beside me. And one night, finally, he asked, "Do you want me to come to bed tonight?" I said yes. He did. We didn't touch. But we didn't need to. His breathing next to me was the closest thing I'd felt to hope in weeks. But here's the thing no one tells you, even the first step back feels like a risk. Because when you've built your life around someone who left without leaving, their return doesn't erase the vacancy. It just rearranges it. You start asking new questions. Can we rebuild this? Will it ever feel the same? How long do you let someone relearn how to love you? How long do you wait before deciding they can't? He looked at me this morning across the kitchen counter, coffee in hand, and said, "I'm scared I waited too long." I didn't say no, you didn't. I couldn't lie. I just said, then don't waste what's left. We're still not okay. But we're not pretending anymore. And in a way, that's something. Not enough. But something. I thought it would feel bigger the moment we finally went to therapy together. It didn't. It felt muted. Like sitting in a waiting room for an appointment you know you need but aren't sure will help. Mark drove us there. Neither of us spoke much on the way. He fiddled with the radio and turned it down again. I picked at the fray on my coat sleeve. When we arrived, Laura met us in the hallway with her usual gentle smile. She glanced at me, then him. "First time?" He nodded, polite but tight in the jaw. Like someone bracing for a root canal he agreed to but doesn't trust. She offered us water. Neither of us took it. Then she gestured to the couch. It looked smaller with the two of us on it. The beginning was slow. Laura asked soft questions, about time. About change. About silence. Mark did what I thought he'd do, he was careful. Measured. He said things like, "It's been hard to articulate how I'm feeling," and I think I shut down without realizing how far I'd gone. I nodded, said nothing. Then Laura asked me, "What do you want him to hear?" My hands were clenched so tight I could feel the crescent moons of my own nails in my palms. "I want him to know that I never stopped choosing him," I said. Even when he stopped showing up. Even when I slept next to an empty pillow for months. Mark's eyes fell to the floor. "I want him to know that silence isn't neutral," I added. "It's loud. It says you're not worth explaining myself to." And I've been listening to that for a long time. Laura let the quiet breathe. Then she said, "Mark, what do you want her to hear?" He took a long time. Finally, he said, that it wasn't about her. That I didn't walk away because I stopped loving her. I walked away because I didn't know how to carry the weight anymore, of grief, of failure, of not being the person I thought I should be by now. "That doesn't make it hurt less," I said. "I know," he whispered. We went again the next week. That session was heavier. I brought up the moment I almost left, the night I stood at the door with my keys in hand. "You didn't even notice," I said. "I did," he replied, voice low. "I just didn't know what to do with it." Laura asked what he was afraid of. "Of making it worse," he said. "Of confirming what I already suspected, that I'm the reason everything's falling apart." "You didn't confirm it," I said. "You just made sure I had to carry it alone." He looked gutted. And for the first time in a long time, I believed he didn't want it to be this way. But wanting isn't the same as doing. We had a better week after that. Small things shifted. He started coming to bed again. Not every night, but more often. We started brushing our teeth at the same time again. That tiny detail felt oddly intimate, like muscle memory returning. One night, we even held hands while watching a show. I cried after he fell asleep. Not because I was sad, but because I was scared that hope could hurt too. Then, 2 days ago, we had a fight. I'd had a hard day. Work stress, family stuff. Nothing huge, just too much at once. I came home and found him lying on the couch in the dark, scrolling on his phone. I said, "Did you eat?" He said, "Not hungry." I asked, "Can we talk?" He sighed, not loudly, just audibly. And that was it. That one sound. I snapped. "Never mind," I said, grabbing my bag. He sat up. "What?" You act like everything I need from you is a burden. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He stood up slowly. I'm trying. No, I said. You're trying not to be the bad guy. That's not the same. His face changed. That's not fair. It's exactly fair. You're terrified of being the one who ends things, so you're just letting them end themselves. He didn't deny it. And I didn't stop. I want you to fight for us, I said. Not just sit in the ruins and say I tried. I don't know how anymore, he said. Quiet. Honest. And that might have been the worst part. Because I could tell he meant it. We didn't speak much the next day. He left for work early. I stayed home. Did laundry. Answered emails. Watched the clock. At noon, he texted, I'm sorry. I didn't respond right away. Because I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive him for something he still didn't fully understand. Therapy again today. Laura asked us both, what do you want the next 6 months to look like? Mark was quiet. Then said, I want to feel like myself again. Laura nodded. And what about the relationship? He hesitated. I want it. There it was again, that sentence. That knife. I looked at him, eyes burning. You're not saying goodbye, I said. But you're not saying stay, either. He closed his eyes. Because I don't want to lie to you. And I'm just supposed to wait here until you decide if I'm still something you want? I'm not asking you to wait, he said. I'm asking you to believe that I'm trying. I have believed that, I said. Every day. While you disappeared. We didn't leave holding hands. We didn't fight. We just drove home in silence. And when we got there, I went upstairs. He stayed in the kitchen. Half an hour later, I heard the soft creak of the stairs. His footsteps. Then, the door opened. And he sat on the edge of the bed. I want to stay, he said. Even if I don't know how to fix it. Even if I'm scared I already broke it. I looked at him. I can't do it alone, I said. I know. Then show me. We slept in the same bed that night. And this time, he didn't roll away. He didn't kiss me. He didn't promise me forever. But he stayed close. His arm brushed mine. And that was enough for now. Some things are still the same. He still doesn't sleep in our bed every night. There are still evenings when he gets quiet, when I watch him pull into himself like a tide going out. There are still moments when I don't know whether to reach for him or give him space. Moments when I do reach and he doesn't reach back. But something's different now. Not fixed. But different. Maybe it started with the night we both woke up at 2:40 a.m., me from a bad dream, him from who knows what. We sat up in the dark like strangers on a red-eye flight. You okay? He asked, voice groggy. I think I was drowning in the dream, I said. Want to talk about it? I shook my head. Just, stay here for a minute. He didn't move, didn't roll away. Eventually, we both fell back asleep sitting up, our shoulders touching, like two trees leaning into each other after a long storm. The next morning, I found a cup of tea waiting for me on the bathroom counter. Nothing dramatic. No note, just warmth, steam. The mug I like. It wasn't love spelled out in apology. But it was something. A gesture. A re-entry. Sometimes, gestures are all we have. Jenna asked if things are better now. I told her I didn't know how to answer that question anymore. They're not fixed, I said. But we're talking. He's showing up more. I'm not crying on the floor every week. She nodded. So, functional dysfunction? More like emotional rehab, I said. She laughed. Same difference. We still go to therapy. Not every week, but enough. Some sessions are raw. Some are boring. Some are short and awkward and end with us both staring at the floor. But we show up. That's become the new baseline. Not passion. Not perfection. Just presence. We went on a date last weekend. Nothing fancy, just a diner we used to love when we were first married. Booths with rips in the cushions. Pie with too much sugar. Waitresses who call everyone hon. We talked about old TV shows. About a weird email from his boss. About my niece Emma, who lost her first tooth and is now demanding $10 per incisor. We didn't talk about us. Not directly. But then the check came, and he picked it up and said, "Next time, we try that taco place you like." Next time. That mattered. That night, I caught him standing in the hallway looking at the photo of us from our anniversary 3 years ago, the one where I'm laughing and he's pretending to dip me like a dancer. I said, "You looked so sure in that photo." He said, "I wasn't." Me neither. We stood there for a while. Then I said, "I still want that version of us." And he said, "I think we're different now." Better? He smiled, but it was sad. Not yet. And I laughed, in that soft, aching way that only tired people laugh. Maybe not worse, though, I said. That's something. We still have awkward nights, still retreat into old patterns sometimes, still forget to touch each other when we pass in the hall, still argue about stupid things, laundry, noise, who used the last of the almond milk. But we also made a list. A physical one. On paper, things that make us feel close. It's taped to the fridge now. A little crumpled, smudged where I spilled coffee on it. It says things like brushing our teeth at the same time, sitting on the same side of the couch, going for a walk with no music, hugging for 10 seconds, minimum, eating in bed, even though we said we wouldn't, watching dumb YouTube videos together, admitting when we're sad even if we don't have a reason. Sometimes we ignore the list, sometimes we follow it like a treasure map, sometimes it helps. My mom asked how we were doing. She didn't ask in that surface-level way. She meant it this time. I paused, then said, "I think we're still figuring it out." She nodded. Marriage is like that. You get comfortable, then you realize comfort isn't always closeness. Then you start over. I didn't expect that from her. Then she added, "Your father slept in the guest room for 6 months after his mother died." I blinked. You never told me that. You were in college. I didn't want you worrying. What happened? She smiled. One night he crawled back into bed and asked if I'd still have him. I didn't ask what she said. I didn't need to. Last night, Mark came to bed late. I was already half asleep. I felt the mattress shift. Then, his hand found mine under the blanket. "Still have me?" he whispered. I didn't say anything. I just squeezed back. This isn't the kind of story that ends with a declaration or a dramatic change. He's not cured. I'm not healed. We're not suddenly passionate newlyweds again. We're two tired people choosing, on purpose, to stay close to the wreckage long enough to rebuild something from it. Not because it's easy, but because sometimes staying is the louder kind of love. This morning, I came downstairs to find him making pancakes. He burned the first batch. I laughed. "You still can't flip." He shrugged. "I get distracted." I took the spatula from his hand and kissed his cheek. We stood there in the kitchen in pajamas, in progress, and for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like peace. We're not better yet. But we're not pretending anymore. And maybe, in a world where most people drift away quietly and never find their way back, maybe that's a kind of love worth staying for.